persistent doubts about the economic recovery. His Commerce Secretary just returned from a trip to try to smooth strained relations with China, as investors worry an economic slowdown there could drag down the world's economy. But it's not clear whether China will commit to taking any action. The U.S. wants them to lift restrictions on tech manufacturing. Other issues are addressing unfair trade practices and intellectual property concerns. Here with me now, straight back from her China trip, is Commerce Secretary Gina Raimondo. Thank you so much for joining me. You are the fourth cabinet member to visit China this summer. You said the biggest accomplishment of your trip was a commitment to communicate more. So far, it seems like these trips have resulted in few substantial, tangible results. So when should Americans expect to see concrete actions from China to fix the problems that they're facing across so many sectors of Americans' everyday lives?
Yeah. Well, good morning, and thank you for having me. I think we did achieve concrete outcomes, Dana. Just to put it in perspective, I'm the first Commerce Secretary in more than 5 years to be on the ground in China. So I think we have to be realistic about what we can and can't accomplish on a first visit. Prior to getting on the plane to head over to China, I spoke with more than 100 business leaders myself in the U.S. across a range of industries. And I spoke with labor leaders, and I asked them, what should I be trying to get done here? And by far, what they said was open lines of communication so we can do the business of resolving issues. And so that's what I was able to accomplish, which I think is very significant. If you can't talk in a structured way about real commercial issues, you have no chance of solving these issues. And furthermore, as you well know, what happens when you don't communicate is you can spiral into greater tension and even conflict because there's misunderstanding and miscalculation. So, I am an optimist, but a realist. I think we accomplished a great deal, and now we'll see if we can get to work with China and have them resolve some issues.
So now that you have the dialogue, which you are calling a concrete result, what leverage are you willing to use through these now new open lines of communication to get China to take tangible, concrete actions, the one that the U.S. and American companies are demanding?
I think the greatest leverage, to use your word, is that it's in the U.S. interest, it's in China's interest, indeed, it's in the world's interest for the U.S. and China to have a stable and significant commercial relationship. And I will say, I met at the very high levels of the Chinese government, including the premier, and they recognized that. We have plenty of tools in our toolbox. In my case, export controls, outbound investment screening, tariffs, countervailing duties. We do have sticks, if you will, and we are very ready, willing, and able to use those as necessary.
Some Republicans, I know you have seen, have been critical of your trip, and especially in light of the fact that the Chinese hacked your emails just weeks before you went. I want to read a quote from Senator Joni Ernst, who said, quote, "China's veiled attempt to indicate it is open for business is a Hail Mary to save its struggling economy, not an olive branch of friendship. The Biden administration must stop taking the bait. No one should realize this hostility more than Secretary Raimondo, who was hacked by the CCP but still traveled to our greatest adversary's own turf to negotiate." How did you respond, first and foremost, when you were talking to the Chinese about the fact that they hacked your emails? How did they respond?
So, I was very clear, direct, and firm in all of my conversations with my Chinese counterparts. I didn't pull any punches. I didn't sugarcoat anything, and no one is more realistic than I am about the challenges. As it relates to the hack, I brought it up. I said, we know what's going on. That erodes trust. And, I wanted to be clear with them that we aren't foolish. We aren't closed-eyed to the reality of what they're trying to do.
How did they respond?
That being said, They suggested that they didn't know about it, and they suggested that it wasn't intentional. So, but I think it was important that I put it on the table and let them know that it's hard to build trust when you have actions like that. But I think here's the real point for me. What value is there in not talking? We know for a fact that not talking leads to escalation, miscalculation, and misunderstanding, which is bad for the American people. It's bad for American workers. It's bad for our national security. I do not accept the premise that talking and communicating is a sign of weakness. I think there's potential value in direct communication. I went there to stick up for American workers and businesses, and that was a message that they heard. Now, whether they choose to take action is, of course, up to them, but not talking, I think, only leads to escalation.
I want to ask about another big issue inside this agenda, which is the U.S. has been trying to prevent companies from working with China to make semiconductors. They, of course, are used in everything from cars to cell phones to televisions. But your administration is facing some criticism that you're undermining your own rule by giving some major companies carve-outs. Those carve-outs expire next month. Are you going to allow these companies to continue to do business with China?
So again, I want to be very clear about what our policy is and what it isn't, and I'm not going to preview here any decisions that we will make in a month or so. No one ever said we want to decouple from China as it relates to semiconductors. We ship billions of dollars of semiconductors every year to China. That is good for the American economy and American businesses, and we will continue to do that. Those are chips that are readily available around the world, that are almost a commodity at this point. What we are going to do, and we will not compromise on, is preventing the sale of our most sophisticated, most powerful semiconductors to China, which China wants for its military. And so, again, this is a complex relationship. It really cannot be boiled down to oversimplified talking points. And so no one's been tough. No Commerce Secretary has been tougher than I on China. Almost a third of the companies from China on the entity list have been put there under President Biden's administration and my leadership at Commerce. However, we want to have a narrow line around what is national security. You can't use export controls for economic advantage. So anyway, we're never going to sell China our most sophisticated advanced AI chips, which they want for their military. But of course, we will continue to do business with them as it relates to less sophisticated, more commodity-like chips.
I understand you're not going to make the announcement right now. Has the decision been made on whether to continue these carve-outs for these companies?
We're still doing the work.
I want to ask more broadly about the economy. There's yet another poll that came out last week that shows President Biden is heading into his reelection bid with his economic approval rating at just 36%. Americans just aren't giving him credit for economic growth. And that's a consistent problem for him, as I'm sure you know. You were an elected official as governor of Rhode Island before coming into the administration. You understand the importance of not just making policy, but communicating policy. Why is the message that you all are pushing on the economy turning around not getting through?
So I'm smiling because I am no longer an elected official, but I will just say the facts speak for themselves on this one. I think the president has done a fantastic job on the economy. The jobs numbers came out today, exactly what we want to see. That's what campaigns are for. The president and his team will run, I have no doubt, a spectacular campaign, tell the story, and Americans will make their decision. But I can tell you from my own experience as a politician, I was constantly confronted with the exact same question, which is to say, I never had through-the-roof popularity, but always won elections convincingly. And so at least I'm not troubled by that as a former politician, but more important in my current role as Commerce Secretary, when I look at this jobs report, increased manufacturing jobs, increased investment, more resilient supply chains, Americans are working, wages are up, I just feel that it's clear that Bidenomics is working for the American people.
Before I let you go, I want to ask you about the issue of abortion, because in Alabama, which has one of the strictest anti-abortion laws in the country, the Attorney General says he has the right to prosecute anyone who helps a pregnant woman travel to get an out-of-state abortion. As the Commerce Secretary, what can or should the Biden administration do to stop that?
So let me say, this is obviously not an area that I'm focused on as Commerce Secretary. I'm very proud of the president for standing up for women and women's access to health care. And I'll tell you, as a business issue, the moves that Republicans are making are wrong-headed. Apart from the fact that women deserve full access to the full range of health care that they deserve, businesses aren't going to want to do business in states that are hostile to women. And so I think that this is a very poor decision just from a business matter. Right? Businesses want to do business in places where there's top talent and in places where you can get women to work in, the best, most talented women to work in businesses. And I think that they're going to see these draconian, wrong-headed actions as it relates to reproductive health care are going to backfire as it relates to their ability to attract talent and attract business.
Okay, Commerce Secretary Gina Raimondo, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you.